So think about this. Somebody in your family wants a cake made for them, but you don't want to go out and buy one. Well, after this, you'll be able to make a cake and decorate it by yourself. Being able to make a cake is a great skill to have. Not only can you make someone a cake if they want one, but you can keep practicing and show off your skills and even sell them to make some money. To make a cake, you will need an oven, cake mix, the ingredients that the cake mix requires, a cake pan, non-stick sprayer parchment paper, icing, a mixing bowl, a wooden spoon, a cooling rack or somewhere to let the cake cool in a pan, refrigerator, a serving plate, a frosting spatula or something to spread icing, and a piping bag with accessories for it as well. The first thing that you need to do is preheat the oven. This cake mix says to heat the oven to 350 degrees, which I have already done. But you also need to spray the pan because you don't want the cake to stick to it. You need to make sure and get the bottom and the edges very well if you don't want pieces of it to stick. This cake mix also requires a 9x13 pan, which I have. It also gives you instructions for different pans. The next thing that you need to do is make your cake better. And you can use a wooden spoon, but I have a whisk. Different ingredients will be needed for different cake mixes, but this one needs 1 cup of water, half a cup of vegetable oil, and 3 eggs. So we're gonna take the cake mix, open it up, gonna pour this into the bowl. Now here I have 1 cup of water, half a cup of vegetable oil, and last I need 3 eggs. Now we're gonna mix this all up. Get it to a real good consistency. Make sure everything is mixed up how it needs to be. Don't have any clumps in it, or can't let it be too wet or too dry. If it is too wet when it comes out, you can add a little bit of flour to it to make it thicker. If it's too dry, you can add a little bit of water until it gets to the right consistency. This seems like a good consistency, so I'm going to keep it this way. And then just make sure it's all mixed up really good in here, so there's no clumps. Now that the batter's done, we need to go ahead and put it in the pan we greased before, and like I said, it is very important that the cake pan is greased, or else the cake will stick to the bottom of it and fall apart when you try to get it out of the oven. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour it into here. Try to spread it out as evenly as you can around the pan while you're pouring it. And then if you need to, you can take a wooden spoon or the spatula or whatever you have and even it out a little bit more if you need to. Try and clean out the bowl the best you can. Get all the batter into the pan how you need it. And now we have the cake all even down here. If you need to even it out, like I said, you can spread it at first, but if you need a little more, just shake it a little bit like this, wiggle it around, it'll even out in the pan. Now that the batter's in the pan and since the oven has been preheated, we're gonna go ahead and put the cake in the oven to let it bake. Be very careful, don't burn your hands, because that's not good. You need to let the cake bake for the time it says on the box, because depending on the ingredients and what cake mix it is, it'll need to bake for a different time. So as you can see here, we used a 13x9 pan and use all the same ingredients, so it needs to bake for between 28 and 33 minutes. So I'm gonna set the timer for 30 minutes and start that. And if we need to, if it's not completely done yet, then we'll let it bake a little longer. What you really need to check for is you need to poke the center of the cake to see if it's done, and if whatever you poke it with comes out clean, there's no wet batter on it, then the cake is done. And if you do poke it and some wet batter comes out of the middle, then the cake isn't done. You need to let it cake until you can poke it and it'll come out clean. So when the cake is done cooling, after it's out, after it's cooled a little bit, you can ice the cake. And you can do that with store-bought icing, or you can make your own icing. And it's very easy. What you need is, you need to have a mixer like this. You need to have butter, powdered sugar, and a little bit of milk or heavy cream, something like that. Depending on how much you want, you get between 2 and 3 sticks of butter. Let it soften, you put it in the bowl, and what you need to do is mix up that butter a little bit to whip it and kind of fluff it up a little bit before you make the icing. So we're gonna mix up the butter we have in here. So after you get done mixing the butter, it should be creamier than before and very soft and melted, not melted, but softened and more whipped than before. And after that, what you need to do is take the powdered sugar, and it takes a lot, so you probably need to have a good amount on hand, and because it takes a few cups worth at least. So we're gonna go ahead and start putting some powdered sugar in here. You don't want to put it all at once, it'll fly everywhere when you try to mix it. So you put a decent amount in there, and you just add more to it as you go along until it gets to the right icing consistency. So we're gonna go ahead and start mixing some of the powdered sugar into the butter. first it's definitely not gonna seem like icing, but like I said, it takes a lot of powdered sugar, so you're just gonna keep adding until it gets to a good icing consistency that you think. And so you just keep adding it. After a little bit, we'll add a little bit of milk and vanilla to it. But we just need to mix this up and get a lot of powdered sugar into it first. Now, since I am making icing for a cake in a pan like that, you don't take the cake out of that pan. If you had a circular pan or a springform pan, then you would take it out of the pan and then ice all around it, ice it all on top and all that. But with that kind of pan, you leave it in there and you just ice over the top of it. So I'm not making a lot, but if you were to need more, you just add a little more butter, add some more powdered sugar, a little more milk or vanilla extract if you need to. But I'm going to keep adding the powdered sugar until it looks better, and then I will add some milk and vanilla to it. So I believe I am feeding the powdered sugar. It's just a little thick, so that's where the milk needs to be added. So gonna grab some milk. You only need to add a little bit, not much at all, or else you will make your icing way too runny. Just a little bit, and then you can mix it up, and if you want some more, then you can do that. Now the milk definitely made it creamier, so it's not as thick anymore. If you want it to be a little less thick, then you can add some more, but don't add too much, or else when you spread it on the cake, especially if it's a round cake that you take out, it'll drain off the sides because it's too runny. So it does need to be pretty thick, and if you do accidentally make it too thin, then you can add a little more powdered sugar if you need to thicken it back up. But if you think it is the right consistency, if you think it'll spread fine, then keep it that way. Now we are going to add a little bit of vanilla just for flavor. So you can get about you need a couple teaspoons, so maybe you don't want too much, so maybe 1 or 2 capfuls is fine. So you just need to add it in there, mix it up. Now we can go ahead and add between another half and full capful. That way it'll give it the right flavor it needs. If you think it needs a little more, or if you don't know, you can taste it, and if it needs more, then you can just add a little more, but don't start out with too much so that it has too much. So you just start off small and then keep adding if you think it needs it. Okay, when your icing is done, you think it looks good, you think it tastes good, you probably need to go ahead and set it in the fridge while your cake is finishing, because not only does it need to finish baking, but it has to cool once it's done, because if you try to add the icing while it's still warm, the icing will melt and then become really runny, and it can also mess up the cake when you try and spread it. It can rip up pieces. So what you need to do is just refrigerate the icing, let the cake finish, let the cake cool, and then you can ice the cake. The cake has about a minute left, so I'm gonna go ahead and check it. Pull this out. Take a knife or anything like that and just poke in the middle. And if it comes out clean, then it's done. So I can go ahead and take this, set it up here, let it cool. If you were to have round metal pans that you put the cake in, then what you do is let them cool for a little bit, and then remove it from the pan, and then let it cool completely until you start icing it. But with this one staying in the pan like this, I just need to set it here, let it cool completely, and when it's done cooling off, when it's not warm anymore, we can go ahead and ice it, and then after we're done icing it, we can decorate it, and then it's done. Okay, so the cake has been cooling for between 15 and 20 minutes, and it's cooled off, so I'm going to go ahead and put icing on top of it before we decorate it. And since this was in the fridge, it's still pretty solid, so it's not too runny or anything. Just mix it up a little bit before you put it on there. Don't put all of it, just put a little bit. Start spreading it out. Spread it out from the middle, so you can try and get the edges so it's not all in the middle. Spread it out evenly. You don't want to put too much because you don't want it to be too thick of a layer of icing. Spread it out evenly. Make sure there's not big parts of icing. If there's a lot in the middle, just push it out from the middle to the edges and then spread it along the edges. Once most of it's covered, just get little bits at a time if you need it. Get corners good and cover all the parts of the cake that you need to. You don't want to have to save too much icing. You don't need that much for decorating, depending on what you're doing. But basic decorations doesn't need that much left over. Just, I mean, you want to use something that you can spread easily with and smooth out the icing with. So I have this, or there's metal frosting spatulas that you can use, and there's ones with rubber tips for spreading icing. Part of it'll lay by itself, it'll even out by itself, but you can use this to spread along edges and get all the parts that you need to. And don't forget not to ice it too early, or else the icing will melt. So now we have the cake iced, and now we are going to decorate. So you can decorate it with different color. I'm gonna add a little bit of blue icing, or a blue food coloring to the icing, so that way the decoration is a different color. So just add that in there, a couple drops. Mix that in there really good, and you can add as much food coloring as you want, depending on what color you want it to be. Right now this is light blue, so I want it to be a little darker, a little deeper blue, so I can add a couple more. And now I have a pretty dark blue icing that I can use to decorate the cake. What you can use to decorate the cake is a piping bag, which you use piping tips like this. You insert it in the bag, put icing in it. Well, if you don't have a piping bag, you can take a Ziploc bag, and what you want to do is cut off the end of it, and you can use it just like you would use a piping bag. So you're going to drop the tip down into here, and then what you're going to do after that, you're just going to open this up and you're going to fill it with icing. And if you don't have a piping tip either, you can just cut an end off of the Ziploc bag and use it to decorate. So we're gonna add this. If you want, you can have somebody help you hold open the bag while you put the icing in there, so it's a little easier, but it's up to you. I'm just gonna try and hold it open and put some icing in there. It will get a little messy, but that's all part of it. If you think you have a decent amount, you can go ahead. And you don't want this to have too much air in it, so try and get some air out of it without pushing icing out of the bag. Got a little messy. Now what you want to do is, all this icing in the bag, you want to try and push it down towards the tip so that you can be able to bunch up the end of it, so you can squeeze it out and ice it very easily. There are tons of different tips that you can use, but now I'm going to head over here, and what you can do is just do basic decorations around the edges and go all the way around like this. Do these basic decorations. And you can just do however you want it to. You can always go get more of the icing you made if you need to. I'm gonna finish decorating it basically, and then I will show you. Okay, so here's the finished cake. It doesn't look too great, but when you practice on your own, you can get decorations down and do anything that you want to. It'll turn out really nice. You can take smaller tips and write anything that you want on it. These are just some small decorations I put on it. It's not much, but there you go. And then you just clean up your supplies when you're done, and there you go. You have a cake.